you're ready. Okay. We will call this emergency meeting of the Terrell County Board of Education to order on August the 20th at 5:35 p.m. Our first order of business is a moment of silence. Thank you. Our next agenda item is COVID-19 procedures, and I'm going to turn it over for Mr. Hawley.
All right, Madam Chair, board members here, just want to check for clarity as I was informed by North Carolina general statute, because we have one meeting a month and we've already had our regular monthly meeting and we offer public comment, technically by law we're not supposed to, or not saying supposed to, you don't have to. But what I've been informed is that we're going to open up tonight to have public comment, so I'm going to ask that because we did not have the form out, if you do want to or wish to have public comment, our board chair will read out the rules and regulations around it. But normally we do a sign-in sheet. If you do speak, please make sure that before you leave, we get your contact information, so if we need to get back as a follow-up, we will. So, Madam Chair, I would ask that you reorder the agenda. Thank you. Matter of fact, if we can make a change to the agenda, and for those individuals, when you come upon the podium, just write your name, contact information, really a phone number, and that'll be the best way. So, Madam Chair, I just ask.
Okay. At this time, we will host a public forum. The purpose of the public forum is to afford the public the opportunity to address the board in 3 minutes on matters related to policy or general concern. The board will listen and may ask questions to try to understand the matter being presented. As a general rule, the board delays discussion and/or decision until a later time. Since this is the only time on the agenda that the audience may participate in the board's meeting, if any person wishes to address the board, she or he should make it known at this time. Please remember that no person addressing the board may refer to a student or employee by name, as they are protected by law from such and may only be discussed in closed session as governed by board policy and commonly recognized practice. Is there anyone who wishes to address tonight? You're welcome to come to the podium, and if you'll just sign the piece of paper with your name and contact.
I've never done this before.
That's okay.
My questions and my concerns are why not give us the options for our kids to have remote learning or package learning? I have children in each school, elementary, middle school, and high school. I mean, my concerns are you can't guarantee their safety. I've had more family members than I can count on one hand suffer from COVID, and the losses are ridiculous. I mean, there's people I couldn't even go see or say goodbye to because of all the regulations with COVID in the world. And as a parent, I don't think it's the teacher's responsibility to look after my kids. I mean, as a parent, I think it's my responsibility. I chose to have my kids. I chose to be there for them. I'm their father. I mean, me and my wife as a spouse, it's our responsibility. So why not give us, several family members that do not speak Spanish or that don't speak English come to me and tell me the same thing. Like, I speak both languages fluently, and as Hispanics, as Hispanic, we suffer more. We're more vulnerable to the virus. That's what everybody's telling us. So we don't want to put our kids at risk. We know that there's families out there that they struggle. School is a way out for them. To have their time to go to work, have their time to do that. But why not? If we've done it through this past year, we survived it on remote learning and half and half. For those who did want it, why not give us that option again? The virus has a new phase now that we see pop up everywhere. This Delta called Byron, and that's more contagious and more, you know what I mean? I'm the only one in my household that works for the exact same reason. That way, at least if I put myself at risk, I come home and I make sure I sanitize myself before I'm even in contact with my family. You know what I mean? I take necessary precautions, and I feel like we need to have that option for remote learning. You can't guarantee me 100% that my child is going to be safe. I don't take my kids out to the grocery store with me because I fear for their life. Not my life, their life. I'm grown, I've lived my life, I've had my share, but my kids, as adults, we have meetings and people don't have face masks. As adults, we don't follow rules. What makes us think a child's gonna follow rules? What makes us think that one teacher can take care of 10, 15 kids at one time? High school just started this one weekend. There's no social distance. Mask is not a requirement. You've had flare-ups in the high school, in the middle schools. Middle school's not even started yet. There's no guarantee that we can control it. So why not give us the option for those parents that are willing to take the time and effort to be there for our kids and to show them, you know what I mean? It helps us. My question is, how moving forward will this be available? You know what I mean? And what options do we have as parents? Because parents feel like, oh, if I don't send my kids to school, I'm the bad guy. I'll be in trouble. I'll go to jail or have social service called on me. This is the questions that parents are asking me. I'm here today because I'm not the only parent that's asking these questions, but I'm the one that can speak language to bring it forward. I mean, we would love to have an option for us. I mean, if there's anything we can do to help make that option possible, please let us know.
Thank you. And just so everybody would know, that was not a phone call I had coming in, but we do set a 3-minute timer, but I did extend if I could. And so if it's up to you, Madam Chair, the next speaker we need to do, I'll put that in the form, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, we didn't catch your name at the beginning.
Oh, sorry. My name is Alberto Suarez Lopez.
Okay, thank you.
Alberto Suarez Lopez.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else for public comment this evening? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item. Thank you all for sharing your public comments.
All right, Madam Chair, I'm going to defer for a second to Ms. Pearl because I see Mr. West is up, mine is not up. Do I need to get him to do it? I need to get him.
Yours is also on that laptop.
Gotcha, thank
So,
you.
are you first?
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize, I'm sorry.
No problem. I heard when you said it, but
Just escape.
gotcha. Because I mean, I messed it up.
It's okay.
Mr. West goes to say he's gonna come up.
We can blame it on the thunder.
we're gonna default with you if that's not a problem.
Sure.
Troubleshoot mine, I didn't want to hold you up on any other day.
Thank you all for having me here tonight, and going to present an update of our district numbers and kind of a picture of this Delta variant that's coming out, some of the more recent state trends we've been seeing the last week or so, and then answer any questions y'all might have about COVID-19 or the Delta variant or anything else. So start out with just a broad overview of what we're seeing in our district. As of today, 11.9% of all cases in North Carolina that we've been doing tests on have come back positive. It's been around 13-12%. We really need that to be below 5% statewide. So as of today, about 15.2 million tests have been done in the state. I put Terrell's number and highlighted that to show you that we've done, since this whole pandemic, 3,726 tests. So we've not even tested the entire population whatsoever. And compared to, like, say, Washington County or Martin County, people come back and back and back for tests, but we've definitely done a lot more testing over there. So we saw that lull in the summer with not much demand for tests, maybe 20 a week is what we would do. So with this big uptick the last week and a half, we're trying to bring in an outside testing vendor to be able to accommodate the demand, because we're seeing about 30 or 40 requests a day. We did about 45 just in Plymouth in our parking lot today, because the demand is getting so big for tests. Right now, we've got 2 ongoing outbreaks in my 3-county district. We got a nursing home in Williamson, but right here in Terrell County, we have Terrell House. We have cases of 1 staff member and 1 resident. Let's kind of skip over the big national picture, but 359 million doses of this vaccine have been given out nationwide. About 60% of the nation has had at least 1 dose, about 51% has had a second. In North Carolina, it's a little bit lower than that. About 54% of all North Carolinians have had at least 1 dose, and only about 45 have had both doses. It's even lower in our 3 counties. Looking at Terrell County, about 43% of the residents in Terrell County have had at least 1 dose of vaccine, and only about 38% have completed that full course of vaccine. If they've had a Johnson & Johnson, they automatically go into that second dose category, so only about 38% of Terrell County has been vaccinated. And a big portion of those people, 18 and older, couldn't be vaccinated until earlier this summer. Now 12 and older can be vaccinated. And so statewide, about 55% of those eligible kids have been vaccinated. So looking at those numbers, we estimate in Terrell County, anywhere from 38 to 40% of those 12 to 18-year-olds have been vaccinated, if we're looking at comparing it to state trends too. We think later this fall, possibly October, November, we're able to vaccinate kids 5 to 12, and then 2 to 5, and then 6 months to 2 later on, earlier next year. But right now, only 12 and older can get that Pfizer vaccine. So that's a big, big population that we're still trying to make sure we get vaccinated. And talking about schools, that 5 and older, that 5 to 12 population is the other big key for your kindergarten through 12th grade, to really ensure that we can get as many of those kids vaccinated as possible when they're eligible. Looking at North Carolina as of today, you can see the numbers continue to rise at an alarming rate. Over 6,600 new cases announced this afternoon. You see it kind of goes up and down a little bit based on, most of the time on the weekends we have low numbers. Monday and Tuesday a little bit lower, then it shoots back up Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So look at that average yellow line continuing to go up. And so we had a couple of days over 7,000 cases, and today we've almost approached that number again. You see we're doing a little bit more testing, slightly more testing, but not enough. The big key to this entire COVID-19 situation is that third part, that hospitalized graph. That's what we really want to see. COVID-19, 80% of the time, it's very, very mild case. If you do get it, you might not have any symptoms. You might have a few mild symptoms. But for the people that do get sick, the people that get hospitalized, it's very, very serious. And so what we look at is statewide pressure on the hospital system. Earlier this summer, we had 200 to 250 people hospitalized statewide with COVID-19. Since then, back in the middle part of July, you can see that trend going up. We crossed over 3,000 people in the hospital yesterday. We're at 3,147 today. At the peak of this the biggest peak back in late January, we never got above 3,800 people hospitalized statewide. At this rate, we're going to blow past that in about 8 days. So, that's what really keeps me up at night, is this hospitalized number. The pressure on the hospital system, when hospitals are full, or say when hospital staff is not there because they've been exposed, and people go home, that's when you're gonna see immense pressure in the hospital system and a lot of people dying of preventable deaths where they can't get in there. So that's the real big key. If anything else is probably that hospitalized number. Our district profile, as of today, we have 16 people in the hospital. I would say Martin County is the only updated numbers today. When I left the office, we had 29 new cases added to Martin County. On the way here, we got my Terrell numbers. We only had 2 new cases today. We had 9 yesterday, so those are yesterday's numbers for Terrell. And so we had 9 cases. We're at 47 total active cases in Terrell County right now, and 2 people hospitalized. I'll add in there too, breakthrough cases. We added that to our report the other day. We have 5 breakthrough cases in Terrell County this entire, since we've been giving out vaccines. And that is when we have a person test positive for COVID-19 after they've completed the vaccines, or 2 vaccines plus 2 weeks after that. If they test positive, they get added to a breakthrough cases. So we're looking at 5 total breakthrough cases since we've been counting, since vaccines have been available. And then I'm going to look at how statewide, just over some of these trends we've seen in the last few days. Cases definitely continue to rise. You can see we had a little peak last fall, and then right around Thanksgiving, Christmas, we had our biggest peak. That was the biggest time for COVID-19 cases. You can see they peaked toward the end of January, February, that number. But look at that triangle. We kind of have a slower increase. Look at this latest one right now. With the rate that it's going up, we're going to easily surpass that January, unless something changes. We thought it was going to be a really short, sharp peak, but we're looking at probably not peaking until the end of September, early October, with this Delta variant. So definitely keep track of the daily number of cases. Case rates amongst all age groups. I'll show that red number. The highest is that the 18 to 24 age group. So that's your college age kids. That's definitely the highest peak. That lowest one is that yellow line, which is the 0 to 17-year-olds, your K through 12 population. You can see they peaked right there in that middle of that January height, that January outbreak. Right now, we're already at our January level with cases amongst K through 12 kids. So keep that in mind. School's just starting, but we're already at the level we were at the height of the pandemic back in January. Incidence is rising statewide, so this is per 100,000 people. Over the last 14 days, you can see Terrell County is about 1,056. You can see down there in Hope County, Robeson County, we're seeing over 1,000, and then a few pockets in the mountains. But definitely we're seeing kind of a big increase in Terrell County, and mainly you're seeing those big increases in counties with a small population that have a pretty big surge. So I mentioned the educational clusters over the last few weeks, and look kind of some historical trends. That chart on the left is cases linked with any educational cluster per week. You can see early in the pandemic, the green, that's your college and university. We saw big spikes when kids went back to college last fall. And we saw mainly it's your college age kids. Then this summer, that orange line is your camps, but now you're starting to see that K through 12 line start to increase. So definitely we'll be promoting that and make sure that our school boards and schools know.
I have a question. How many of these places mandated masks?
Yeah, I got a slide right there in just a second.
And still show the increase? That's my question.
Sure. Yeah, we can overlay those maps and show which counties have had mask mandates and which counties are showing that high incidence. I'll go back one slide. The counties in the dark blue are typically your lower counties for vaccination rates. I say Terrell's in our little region, we're about 38%. Down there, where it's the dark blue in the Hope County, Lumberton area, Cumberland County, all those are about 25% fully vaccinated. So we're seeing the biggest increase in that Sand Hills area down towards that bottom part of the state. We also look at this chart. This is your number of ED visits for COVID-like illness. Usually we do these for flu every year. We see a flu spike in the fall. So you can see like little spikes over 2019, 20, 18, 19. But we saw that big increase back there in November, December, January. We're seeing that big increase start again.
So nobody had the flu?
We have not seen many flu last year at all. And one of the reasons is most people were wearing masks. We just had very, very few flu cases last year. And then I've only got 2 more slides, but we've had a lot of questions about vaccinated versus unvaccinated people in these cases. And so we're reporting these breakthrough cases now. This is people that still test positive after they've been vaccinated. And you can see most of the year it was about 98% of all cases we were seeing are amongst unvaccinated people. That's risen about post-vaccination cases, that's those breakthrough cases, made up 18% of these cases through the week ending August 14th. So we're starting to see a few more breakout cases now. 82% of all new cases are unvaccinated, about 18% are vaccinated. So we look at the attack rate increasing for unvaccinated individuals. What's the risk to get COVID-19 for people who are vaccinated versus unvaccinated? 461 cases per 100,000. Attack rate amongst vaccinated individuals was 131 per 100,000. That orange line. So unvaccinated people were 3.5 times more likely to get COVID-19 than vaccinated people. So let's look at the risk of dying. What's the risk of dying for COVID-19 for people who are vaccinated versus unvaccinated? Mortality rate for unvaccinated individuals was 1.05 per 100,000. Mortality rate for vaccinated people was 0.23, meaning it's 4 times more likely to get COVID and die as an unvaccinated person than as a vaccinated person. That gives me more, that's the biggest selling point for a vaccine, because anything else is how, few cases we're seeing coming out now of vaccinated people and how few people are in the hospital if they're vaccinated. Biden puts out their numbers for this area for how many people in the ICU. You can look at that every single day and see how many people are admitted with vaccinated versus unvaccinated, how many people are in the ICU, how many people are on ventilators. As of last night, 22 people were on ventilators, 1 was vaccinated. So we're definitely, that's what we're looking at as this picture. And we want to make sure that when we're going around, talking to different school boards, talking to Martin County, talking to Washington County. And I want to make sure everybody knows that, we look at these, a lot of questions. So we look at the following state guidelines, which is to make sure that your masks are worn. That's in yellow, and then following state guidelines no is in purple. And then in the last 2 weeks, which counties have changed their mask mandate to follow the state guidelines in orange. All right, and I want to make sure, ask any questions anybody might have. So we offer Pfizer vaccines for people 12 and older, Moderna and J&J, and all these vaccines are free. We're making sure that we want to make sure everybody knows about it. Come out and get the vaccine if they have not had it yet. So glad to answer any questions.
Well, Mr. West, it's not really a question, just a point of clarity for everyone. As recent as 4 hours before this meeting, we were in contact with your office trying to identify quarantine procedures for the district. And just for the public, how tedious of a task that is for your department and our department as a school system when you have so many factors that require us to look at depending on who's vaccinated. So can you kind of talk about some of the things we have to work through as 2 agencies before we can determine if this person is on 7 days, if this person is on 14 days, or if this person is coming right back to work?
Sure. Well, the gold standard for quarantine is 14 days. Recently, the CDC, several months ago, they put out quarantine guidelines for people, recognizing that most people don't do the full 14 days when you ask them to. They shortened it to 7 days. If you're around a person you're in close contact and say you have no symptoms, after 5 days you get tested. And after 7 days you still have no symptoms, 7-day quarantine is possible for that. If you decide you don't want to go get a COVID test at all, but you have no symptoms, after 10 days, that's fine to go out. It's 7, 10, 14. So 7, you go get tested, you have no symptoms after 7 days, that's all 14. This is for adults in most businesses that we talk to. And it changes if you've been vaccinated. If a person has been vaccinated, and I say I've had the vaccine 8 months ago, I've been exposed to a person, I do not have to quarantine. I can stay home, and I can monitor my symptoms and go to work, I can wear a mask, I can do all those type of things. But I do not have to do those 7, 10, 14-day quarantines. So what the health department does, we look at each case and we see like how close that person was and all that before we make a recommendation on the 7, 10, 14.
And even like with us as a school system, one of the things we have to look at is first question on our sheet is the person was vaccinated if the person had on a mask? That allows us to navigate a little bit differently too, if the mask is worn. Prime example, on my slideshow, we've had several numbers, and I'll share it later, of about 30 staff members that were contact of a positive case. But because of their vaccination status and the choice that they decided to wear a mask, we did not have to quarantine those individuals. So even though you have your rules, we have rules too in our book that we're all looking at, because it's coming from the Department of Health and Human Services. I just want that to be explained so that folks will understand what was going on with why one may be and one may not be.
Sure, and we get a lot of questions like that about the nuances, because we have, I'll give you an example in other places, like this person was around somebody for 10 minutes here. They were back around them for 20 minutes here. This person says it was 10 minutes, this person says 20. Like, how do we decide, which is the more reliable story, which is the more true story, or something like that? We have to try to guess almost, it's based on different interviews with different people. And it's really hard to come up with recommendations for every single individual. And so I really, you'll have a very difficult job to make sure you're identifying these cases and making that proper recommendation.
All right, the question I asked earlier was, can you show where the mandates of the mask have resulted in lower cases? What you're showing now is who's mandated it.
This is who's mandated.
There's more cases in Washington County than there are in Terrell County, despite they mandate a mask.
I can take a layer mask or a map and create one and just show, but it's really not been, school's only been in session for a while. They will not show up probably.
So there's no data that proves that that a mandate of a mask is going to make a difference.
Well,
Not vaccinations now, because we don't, vaccinations, we're not mandating vaccinations, that's not us.
right, nobody, not vaccinations, it's just, we'll look at vaccination rates, this is highest incidence in those counties. So we probably will see some data later on as schools start back, which schools or which counties have those outbreaks, and that will be probably reflected on the map too. It's just too new to have any data like that.
Okay, okay, thank you.
So my question is, the last 2 days, Mr. Hawley's been on the phone quite a bit with your staff and yourself. Was there a way we could have mitigated to not having so many people under quarantine, whether it be faculty staff or students?
Because you can't mandate vaccines for staff, you encourage staff to take their vaccine, and so it would be a little bit different if there was, if the staff is vaccinated versus unvaccinated. You take that into account by recommending quarantine for staff and students. And so, 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds, some of them might have been vaccinated, some of them might not. It just depends on how long, if they've had their both doses and 2 weeks after the last one, that would impact some of those quarantine recommendations.
So how does masking play into the decision to quarantine or not? Like right now we're under an optional mandate. Because we're under optional, does that mean more people have to quarantine? Or if we were to do a mandatory mask, are less people going to quarantine? Could you give scenarios like that of what would happen, or does it change anything?
Sure, it changes a little. Like if you've had two people that are vaccinated and they're both wearing their masks when they're in person, or if they're not unvaccinated, and one of them's wearing one and one's not. If you're around a close contact and you've got a vaccine, it makes a little bit of a difference when you're talking with our case investigators.
What does that mean?
Really,
a little bit of difference?
So, well, let me explain how much it makes of a difference from the operation of the school system. So the guidance that is in the toolbox, the toolbook that the board has had access to, and I sent the highlighted copies on earlier this week. To give you an example, this week alone, we had 5 cases of students and 1 case of a student, 5 cases of positive student cases of COVID. We had 1 positive staff case. From that, we were able to track that now affected 23 staff members in our school systems. So I was looking at those 23 and continuing to figure out if they were close contact, because we were able to identify that these individuals had a mask and they were vaccinated. We've only had to quarantine 8 of those original 23 that was direct contact. Okay. As far as our students are concerned, we had
what is the difference between the mask alone, not the vaccine?
Because in that toolbook that you have in front of you, it states that if we have the option that the mask we could verify the mask was worn and we were social distancing with students, we don't have to quarantine that class.
Regardless of the vaccination status.
Because it didn't ask about the students at the time. We had a case during our summer program, the Thursday before we got out, where we were able to not have to quarantine an entire class because that specific teacher mandates, and she's on top of the fact that the mask is worn and we separate. So by the Department of Health and Human Services, we did not have to quarantine that class. If we went in there and found out, like we are now, since we've been back since the 16th, that whole class would have had to be quarantined if we had the mass numbers that we're seeing this week. Since the 16th, we've had 65 students considered close contact. We now are still waiting because of the individuals that just were notified at 3 o'clock, I believe, this evening. We're still waiting to find the vaccination. So to your question, per that guidance on page 19 and 14, one of the check boxes that allows us as a school system to keep kids in face-to-face as it is under our control, we have a better chance of keeping them in if we can say they have a mask and we are mandating a mask in the building.
Did it have to be social distance too?
So on that checklist that's in that document that you provided in your tool book, and I shared with the board several meetings ago, it said that social distancing was, I don't have it in this one, but
All right, it says,
Page 14.
students were engaged in consistent and correct use of a well-fitting mask and the use of physical social distancing. Well, I mean,
It says other prevention strategies.
other prevention strategies. What are the other prevention strategies?
So
It says universal correct mask use, physical distancing, and increased ventilation.
So what we are doing is what we've been doing before we came back to school. It was the hand sanitizer that we have is still available in the classroom. Our classrooms are spaced out. However, when they do go out, the kids gather together, but our classrooms are still set up at the high school to provide the space that we can in that limited room. So we are spacing them out. We actually have the plexiglass that was supposed to be up, but the thing is, when we took them down this summer, we can't secure them, so we're waiting to get the apparatus to secure them so they don't fall off the desk. But we are social distancing in the
That's probably smart.
classroom, and that is one of the methods that helps us as a district.
So if they're wearing their mask and there's a positive case in that class, regardless of their vaccination status, they don't have to quarantine.
If it's a positive case in that class, regardless of their vaccination status,
And they
we
wore a
have to
mask, they don't
follow-
have to quarantine.
it gives us a better chance of not having to quarantine them. Because keep in mind, our elementary students cannot take the vaccine because of their age. And so right now, since the 16th, those numbers that I was talking about, the 65 students that have been considered close contact, that's only because of the 202 students that have come back to the high school. We now have about 400 collectively that are set to come back on Monday. And we're sitting with 6 teachers. We're sitting with 6 teachers out at the middle school right now, 6 staff members out at the middle school right now that are currently under quarantine that will take them beyond, and I think they cannot return until the 30th. And we have 2 staff members at the high school that are out under quarantine because of their decisions around masking and vaccines.
Okay. Well, but what you're saying is not what's happening in the schools, because I got notification today, my child who's worn a mask and has to quarantine.
Yes, because if you remember, I told y'all as a board that because we're short-staffed, and that letter that you had, if you looked at it, you need to contact us with a vaccination statement if your child does, because if your child, because you said your child, if he or her is vaccinated, they provide that card, and Wes, correct me if I'm wrong, if he's
But
vaccinated.
wait a minute, you just said that if they wore the mask, regardless of the vaccination status,
Correct.
they wouldn't have to quarantine.
But I also told you what we read here, and I repeat what the board decided, because we're so short-staffed, and that we're putting the onus on the parents, that when we have a vaccination, well, not a vaccination, quarantine, we do not have the time nor the staff right now to go and track down the number of 69 kids. We're doing our best. So in your case, if your child is vaccinated and they provide us with the card, based on.
You just said regardless of the vaccination status, if they wore a mask, both of y'all just said that, then they wouldn't have to be quarantined.
No, you double back and asked the vaccinated staff. I told you that the mask gives us a stronger stance. of
So
keeping the kids-
it makes no difference if they wear the mask or not, they still have to be quarantined if they're not vaccinated.
So, if the vaccinated child is full, based on the guidance that's in this book that we've shared several times, if they within 2 weeks of that vaccine contact, if we're correct, that child provides the vaccination card, they do not have to quarantine, am I correct?
So,
That's not what you just said.
but that's not what we just said.
Yeah.
We're asking about the mask. We're not mandating vaccinations tonight unless there's something I don't know about. One of the questions we're being asked tonight is whether we're gonna mandate that, people have to wear a mask. And I said, regardless of the vaccination status, if that child wears a mask, do they have to quarantine?
So, the example that I gave to you, and my question, let's go to the board, because I can
Because,
give you
I'm not understanding any more than you are. It seems like we're, and I know you're trying to interpret this, but it seems like we're changing this to fit whatever it happens to fit at the
We're
time.
not changing this. The guidance has provided us, if you go to the front, and this is on page 9 of the CDC actually Department of Health and Human Services handbook, it says indoor masks are required, recommended for all people, including students, staff. If you go down, all schools should require that all staff in grades 12 to K through 12 wear face coverings consistently when indoors. The first thing that we get asked is, was those students wearing face masks? If you look here, because if a student cannot consistently meet it during meal times, it gives you those check boxes that you have.
Okay.
So, I think my question, and Lee, please forgive me, I'm trying to
Go
follow
ahead.
this too. So in the summer, it was my understanding you didn't have to quarantine that class for the summer because they were wearing masks and were socially distanced. So I think the question Lee's asking, if we did it in the summer like that, why
still-
does it not
Why does it
apply
not
now?
apply now?
Is it because we have an optional mask
So-
and that in order for it to apply, we all have to wear masks, or?
That's the main thing that we're seeing for schools, since we can't know the status of all the teachers and staff, and we can't know the status of all the students. That's why we're recommending the mask. So if you're not vaccinated, that's why you have that extra layer.
Well, we know that you're recommending, but can you tell us now, if we mandate these masks and, say for instance, we have a meeting and we all have to wear the mask. Karen tests positive tomorrow. I don't have to quarantine because we wore a mask. Is that what you're saying? I don't understand what the point of mandating the mask is.
We look at these cases on an individual basis and how long you were apart and how close you were based on this kind of radius.
And
You're sitting right next to the person, you wear a mask, if you're not vaccinated, we would still recommend you do that.
And to the point of us interpreting it, I'm going by the changing guides. And so to ask a blanket statement about one child as it compares to 600 that are coming back in this building, I can't give you a blanket statement. As I asked them to explain earlier, some of them on a case-by-case basis. So if there is a full vaccination that was not in the 2-week guideline per the guidance, that person is not considered.
Well,
to
and I
not
don't
have
think we can
quarantine.
consider vaccination status because right now, if you're under 12, you can't get it anyway.
Correct.
And the majority of our kids are gonna be in that group. So, that's why I think we don't need to look at vaccination status.
Let me re-ask this mask question another way. With today's quarantine at the high school, if we had mandated masks, how would that have played out differently? Would it have?
Y'all
I mean,
talked
I
the
don't-
other day, I've not had.
Okay.
But,
So
I'll
would
give you an
that,
example.
would we have mitigated that differently? Would we have still had to quarantine, please forgive me, 59 or 80? I can't remember.
How many kids do we have?
59.
Yeah.
Would we, if we had already had a mask requirement in place, would we have had to quarantine 59 kids?
So I'm gonna let Mr. West give his statement before I answer. Oh, this example he's giving.
We have a clinical disease nurse, and some
Yes.
people state that they go back and forth in each case. We have several recommendations for inside classrooms. Basically, if you're within that 6-foot radius of somebody or a 3-foot radius, but mainly the gold standard is 6 feet, and not wearing a mask, been around somebody for more than 15 minutes, we recommend those people quarantine. If you can't guarantee, that's why we take that abundance of caution with that many people. You had probably been inside that radius with that person for more than 15 minutes. So we err on the side of caution, we recommend the quarantine for all those people that could have come in contact.
If
So
they
the
If you're on
were-
the outside perimeter of the classroom, if you're 10 feet away and you're wearing your mask, we don't recommend that.
So would we
But
have
if
had
you're
less?
10 feet away and you're not wearing a mask, you'd be quarantined? If you're not in that classroom? Because, there's certain times they're gonna take these things off. I mean, they're gonna eat, they're gonna drink, so they're not
We
gonna stay
can't guarantee
on.
that all the time, so that's why it's better to err on the side that if you're wearing it all the time, the majority of the time you're around somebody, you're masked, that keeps it down. Majority of the time, hopefully you're a distance from somebody, that keeps it down. All these are strategies to keep it down, none of them are
Okay.
perfect. But the main overarching thing with the mask recommendation for schools is that we do not know how many people are vaccinated or actually going to be, close to each other, or how many people are positive. So that's why the masks give you that extra layer of protection. basically.
I would,
Y'all got questions?
I would bring the
I'm tired of
board back,
asking questions.
I'll bring the board back to the highlighted documents that I believe is part of where the question is. If you go back to page 14, as this is the guidance that I received, we've all received, and this is how we look at it as a district. And so if you look at it, it gives you all the symptoms, and it gives you everything that we're looking to try to do. If you'll go to the bottom of page 15, where it states quarantine. A quarantine is required for individuals who have been in close contact within 6 feet for at least 15 minutes in a cumulative period of over 24 hours of someone who is determined to be COVID positive, testing with symptoms contagious. Individuals who are fully vaccinated do not have symptoms, individuals who are fully vaccinated and do not have symptoms do not need to quarantine after close contact. Those individuals, however, must get tested for 3 to 5 days. Students who tested positive within the last 3 months and recovered do not have to have symptoms, recovered and do not have symptoms, do not have to quarantine. So, to
Not to
answer your
mention a mask
question,
in there.
to answer your question about the masking, if you go to the third bullet, students who are not willingly fully vaccinated after close contact in a classroom or in school setting, if masks were worn inappropriately and consistent by both the person with COVID and the potential, do not need to quarantine. This is where we did in July. This is where we can better and keep our kids in. That's the statement to your question, Mr. Scripture. If we have it, that is where we can go and keep our students back in school.
Okay, so for instance, right now, masks are required on the bus. If there's a positive case on the bus, nobody on that bus should have to quarantine
So
now.
technically, no, because your bus does not have moving air. So because that is a confined room, no bigger than two of these tables, those individuals have to quarantine. That is part of the reason why our football team is not playing Friday night.
Could we have mitigated that by opening windows?
That's one strategy,
Okay.
but keep in mind, that's one strategy. But I don't know
The buses
how
don't have
much
air
the buses,
I think it has to be
I
increased
asked-
ventilation.
our buses have air conditioning, but it's a difference between air conditioning and circulation.
I think it's something with ventilation. Can we explore that as mitigation strategies?
All right.
We sure can, because that's part of what the CARES funding and the ESSER grants we cover.
Okay.
And that was in there around mitigation strategy to be approved.
Okay.
All right.
That's just another layer. So here, thank you for reading this for us, to see that and sharing it with the group that's here present and online.
And that's,
So-
and just to point out,
And
this
that
was
did answer my
highlighted.
question.
Yeah, and
So
that was
thank you.
what was highlighted in my earlier email to the board.
Yes, and it did just answer my question. I just couldn't find it at that time we were looking for it. Thank you.
Rob and Jane, y'all got any questions?
Are there any,
Did you have a question, Jane? No.
are there any other questions from Mr. Gray? I think we're still reading a little bit more questions.
It says in here that this applies to school transportation. It says, this applies to exposures in classrooms, other school settings, and school transportation, but that not during extracurricular or athletic activities. So that's where your football team got. So it's, according to this, the school transportation, if they're wearing a mask, they shouldn't have to quarantine.
The problem, correct. So if you're reading it that way, Mr. Scripture.
I'm reading it right the way it says.
Each of these are individual, because that bus, determined by the guidance and the experts that work on this every day, the information that was provided to me by those, because I'm not gonna sit here and claim that I went to school to study into this, but there's doctors and there's folks that I'm gonna put my trust in to give me the best information to keep our students safe in this district. So right there, if that bus has traveled to Okotoks and those windows were down and you got 13 kids in there breathing.
No,
I
no,
can't
no,
guarantee-
athletic activities, they don't count. It says in there, but it talks about school transportation, like kids back and forth to school on the bus.
Right, but
So if we have an exposure incident on the bus, they don't have to quarantine, according to this. Read down there and about, said this applies to exposures in classrooms, other school settings, and school transportation, but does not apply to exposures during extracurricular or athletic activities.
Right, so, the reason I look down is to gather my thoughts to make sure I give you the right answer as clear as I can. Also keep in mind that I, by this guidance, have to consult with the health department who are trained in providing this information. And so, as a school board, we move around what we hear, what we say. I'm going off of the guidance of the folks that got degrees in it.
So the health department makes the decision, not us.
It is in conjunction with the health department, and that's what has been in every document we said, correct me if I'm
Right, and
wrong.
those are suggestions and guidelines. We put those out for festivals in the fall, we put them out for schools. we put them
This
out
is
for-
your, but I'm reading your
Right,
suggestion here,
that's-
but you just said we're not gonna
That's a
follow.
toolkit for schools to do the best practices to mitigate.
And keep in mind.
We
if you
look at
remember-
every single case that comes in as we're required to do, for a communicable disease, we look at every single case and make recommendations on that individual case.
And keep in mind, as we all know in here, this thing changes and we have to move and adapt. My conversation tonight and whatever the board decides to do is to put the power into the school system to give me the ability and the authorization to keep kids in, because we sat in this very same room over this last several months. We've had a parent stand up tonight talk about remote options. I want to do whatever I can to keep kids in. And if this book and this guidance says that, Holly, you have the authority, if you can say you had kids in mass to keep them in the building, because we had all got inundated of how folks hated remote instruction. This gives us, as long as we have control, another notch in our hat to keep kids in schools. And so that's where I would like for our board, and that's going to be my recommendation to the board, is that we bring the face mask back into the district to give our staff and our students a chance to recoup what we didn't miss.
Well, wait a minute, but it says on staff, this exception does not apply to teacher, staff, or other adults in the indoor classroom setting. So, teachers get exposed whether they had a mask on or not.
And that's exactly what the
So-
trouble is, with every day we get a call about somebody being sick, we got to go through this book and figure out what's going on. We've got 5 individuals on our staff that make up a team that goes back and try to call these parents and figure out. And that is what I shared with the board, part of a hard task to get done with a small team. I got 5 folks in this team, that I know for a fact we probably had less than 10 hours of sleep trying to count and figure out which kids we can keep in and which kids we can get out. Or not get out, I'm sorry, quarantine for kids that we can keep in.
All right, and who are they? That you,
Gotcha. The team is, so y'all all know,
Okay.
it is myself, Dr. Boone with HR. It is Ms. Audrey Curls, as we have to communicate that information out to families on our website, and our nurse.
all right, who's the 5th one? You, Ms. Curls, Dr. Boone, and, the
Our
nurse.
Right.
Oh, so 4.
That's 4.
Apologize, that's 4.
Oh, okay, all right, I figured the principal.
But also keep in mind, right, the principal get pools in if that accounts to their school. But the core group of the 4 that we said that.
The principal ought to get some say-so.
So
Well, at
with
least
that
enjoy the
being
fun.
said, Ms. Helms, I guess, would like to say something.
I would, and honestly, just with all due respect and transparency, but I think we have forgotten that our kids are not a statistic and a number. We may have to quarantine 1, but that 1 is 1 that's not in our room. It is inconvenient to wear this mask. Nobody asked for it, nobody wants it. Nobody knows that the vaccine works, nobody knows that this mask works. We don't know. We have to trust it. We don't know if this science is gonna work. But based off that toolkit and the guidance and the people who study this thing, we've been told that if you wear it or if you get it, there's a chance that it's gonna help. And if you got it and you wear it, there's a chance you don't have to quarantine. Which means if you have it or you wear it, you can stay in school and you can get a proper education. We are a business of learning. And if we can't run our business, then because we're not doing what we need to do, whether it's wear the mask or not wear the mask or whatever, then what are we doing? I don't know when I get in my car tonight and I put my seatbelt on, which is the law, if it's going to save my life if I get in an accident.
But you got a chance.
But I have a chance,
Right.
and it's required.
November
I think-
16th, and I
I
just
think,
a point of personal privilege, I'm sorry, I'm not talking over you. But November 16th, I got rushed 4 o'clock in the morning to Little Chawan Hospital for a possible heart attack. I spent 9 hours in that hospital waiting for a room to clear up in Pitt County because I was sitting there not coded, but tested for a heart attack then. The reason I couldn't get there, guess why? These hospital beds in Pitt County were jam-packed with COVID cases. I got there fortunate. I saw 13 people in that hallway that could not get into a room that were getting treated in the hallway. I'm not going to sit and argue the politics around masks. That's not my job. All I'm asking is that the board, looking at this guidance, gives the school system and the people that are running the school system, as well as your board and the buildings, the chance to give our kids as many chances to stay in this building and get an education and not put them home.
Yeah, you can finish, but I would love to say something.
well, and I say this to finish this last point because I'm sitting here taking notes, and I say this because this is some of the things that I have spoke to Mr. Holly and expressed this to Ms. Cloud the other day when she called to get some feedback on input from staff since they've been in my building. The same board meeting that we spent time deciding about whether to make masks optional or not is the same board meeting that we voted or tabled the dress code policy. So when we look at those two items, we are now saying that students have to wear a certain thing. And I know I'm not probably speaking what some of you want to hear, and I'm so sorry. But this is about our students. We spent so much time talking about what our students were to wear. Shorts 4 inches above the knee. But now something that could possibly save their life, but most definitely possibly could keep them in school to get not only an education, but we've talked about it as admin. We've got kids, Mr. Ziegler's already started, but we have kids coming in our building Monday that have not been in that building since March 13th, 2020. They need us. And so if I can tell a student they have to wear shorts 4 inches above their knee, then why can't I make them wear a mask? That's all I ask.
Ms. Cloud, if I may, Chairman, because the question I get all the time is what do the principals want?
May I just for a moment?
Yes, ma'am?
Just hold that thought. Is there any more questions for Mr. Gray?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, he has been standing here patiently, and I would like to excuse him. I am holding that point. Thank you, Mr. High, because I think you have a presentation too. So, yeah.
I gave about all of them.
I know. That's why I was like, we've gone into this. Are there any more questions for Mr. Gray? Thank you, Mr. Gray, for being here this evening, and for sharing us updated stats for COVID for Carroll County. And thank you for all you do for our community. Okay, Mr. Hall.
To my point, and I hate to ask Mr. Ziegler on the spot because I know our other individual could not be with us tonight. But Mr. Ziegler, could you, since you're in the heat of the moment of the one that's back for the last 5 days, kind of talk about what you're seeing, what you've had to deal with in time to address where we're at?
Yes, sir. So at the high school, we had a football game. 14 of those students had to quarantine as a result due to COVID exposure. So that happened. I believe that was Tuesday, and then this whole week was a blur. And then just today, we're informed that we had another exposure at the high school, which forced a quarantine of 59 students. So we're looking around, well, it was 56 new students, so 3 of those were on the roster. So what we're looking at is about 70 students quarantined right now at the high school, and 2 staff members. And that was just in the first week. Personally, I wear my mask every day, all day. I do take off occasionally in my office when the door's closed. Other than that, I have my mask on all the time. Especially when I'm outside during breaks and lunches, just because that's a lot of traffic, a lot of students moving about. I would guess that about 25% of the students at the high school are wearing a mask, the rest are not. And with that 25%, some are not wearing them correctly. Some have them down on their chin, nose exposed, things like that. So even though they have them on their face, they're not correctly on their face. I don't know if the board has any questions about what has transpired at high school in the first 5 days.
So if we'd have mandated masks, what will we be looking at for?
Well, I believe that definitely the football team will be quarantined still.
Yeah, well, yeah, because the athletics is not even,
Yes, sir.
I mean, they don't, that's
And
different.
then, it's hard to say, because of the activities in the classrooms. So, one of the classrooms was a CTE class, which has a lot of movement, a lot of students moving around. So, if that COVID student was in that room, he's moving around, he's gonna be within 6 foot of other students. So, potentially looking at that whole classroom being quarantined regardless.
Thank you.
Well, and can I piggyback too? Sorry. But we talked about the obligations of our teachers and how much stress our teachers are under. When you make masks optional, our teachers now have to be mask police. Because when we go to quarantine, we have to keep track of who had the mask on and who didn't. Because when Mr. Hawley makes the phone call to Mr. Gray, the question's gonna be, did they have their mask on? And so now as a teacher, I have to keep track of, did Johnny have his mask on? Did Johnny take his mask off? And then in transition periods, did they rotate from block 1 to block 2? Did they take their mask off between block 1 and block 2? But if you make it mandatory for all of them to wear it, and it's not an option. And so the teachers don't have to worry about keeping track and following, did Johnny keep his mask on the entire time? We've had pre-K3 and pre-K4 in our building this entire time. During remote learning, our pre-K3 and pre-K4 students were still in our building. Did we have to remind them, pull it up over your nose? Miss Michelle Berkowski, correct me if I'm wrong. We had to remind them, pull it up over your nose. These are 3 and 4-year-olds. It's a learned behavior that has to be taught just like everything else. But once they learn how to do it, they do it. It's the norm, unfortunately, right now. So if we want to reduce some stress off the teachers, let's not make them the mask police. Sorry.
Go ahead. Any other questions from the high school?
Are there any other questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Karen?
Yes.
Are we at a point that I can make a motion? Because I don't believe in beating a dead horse.
That's why I was getting ready to ask Mr. Hawley if he was ready for us to head in that direction, or if he had a recommendation he wanted to share first, or are you okay for us to make a motion?
I can't get it. My
Okay.
recommendation was, what I shared, is that we require masks in the Terrell County School buildings, including central office for staff, students, and visitors. We look at it, as we said before, monitor it. If something changes, we can come back and visit it, as we said before. Also, I know that Ms. Helms and them will probably won't have a problem, but I would like for us to have some conversation around where we go with the usage of the cafeteria. I know the elementary poses a problem, but see how we can safely, if we can, but the main thing, if we operate how we did before, but my recommendation is make masks mandatory on all Terrell County schools property.
Okay,
That's my recommendation to the board.
thank you, Mr. Hawley. Ms. Janey?
I would like a motion that we accept the recommendation of the superintendent of Terrell County Schools about mask mandate.
Ms. Janey has made a motion to accept Mr. Hawley's recommendation that we make masks mandatory for all Terrell County schools and central office for all staff, students, and visitors, and any other person that may come into
And
our
this will be
school.
effective for Monday, August the 23rd, 2021.
Okay, do we need to amend the motion for discussion?
Immediately. You can add immediately, was,
Will you make a point of amendment for immediate?
Yes.
Okay. So Ms. Janey has made a amendment to her motion for it to begin immediately. And is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, how do you vote, Ms. Janey?
Yes.
How do you vote, Ms. Robin?
Yes.
How do you vote, Mr. Lee?
No.
And I vote yes. That is a 3-1 vote for the mandatory use of masks in the Terrell County schools. Okay, our next item, Mr. Hawley, I believe we have a couple of questions, I think, unless you have a presentation.
No, it's, honestly, I gave it and Wes took all the slides.
Okay, so is there anyone who has questions about some COVID? I think Ms. Robin has sent a question via email.
Yes,
I just
so-
didn't know if you and Dr. Boone could
Yes,
address
that
that
was
with
the other
them.
thing. I
Okay,
wanted to bring up, and this was another point, and I forgot the letter the board received from the governor's
I
office.
did too, but that's good.
But the other thing, Ms. Robin, thank you for your email. With all of this, there's only an 80-hour COVID time that is provided for state employees in this situation. And so I'm going to ask Dr. Boone if she could come up and kind of better explain, because we want to get this out to staff, because what technically happens is if a staff member, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Boone, matter of fact, you do your presentation before I steal your thunder, I'm sorry.
Well, it's not a presentation, but basically, what was called COVID leave ended March 2021. But because COVID is considered contagious, it now falls under the contagious disease guideline in the State Human Resources Manual. And what happens is an entity, any type of business or county or government entity such as ourselves, can allow for telework. That means people can work from home. So it is up to the district or the entity to allow people, you would tell them whether or not they can work from home, which we do as a district, because contagious disease leave, you only get 80 hours, period. So if, let's say, if there was no such thing as telework, and I use those 80 hours of leave, whether it's flu, whatever contagious disease leave it is, COVID, whatever. After that 80 hours, I no longer get paid. That's it. Mr. West and I were talking about this morning, that, you know, people in some organizations who don't allow for telework, people are suffering because they're losing money. The 80 hours is paid leave. Once it's gone, it's gone. So if you continue to get sick for some reason, or you're exposed, or you're quarantined, you do not get paid. So one of the benefits of the school system is that the superintendent has allowed for teachers and custodians and others who are exposed or mandatory quarantine is to telework. That way, they still are under the paid leave guidelines, so they get paid unless they do not want to work. Not sick, but do not want to work. If they do not want to work, they have to take sick leave. If they don't have sick leave, that comes out of their pay.
And so point of clarity, because the first thing that somebody's probably thinking is, well, what does a custodian do from home? So the district years ago invested in a software program for additional training. So if it is a system that we think the job is physical, that you physically have to be there, they are allowed, and those courses are assigned times that will complete, that will justify the time that they can still work from home and complete that as well.
So let me make sure that I understand it. So any staff members that get quarantined, we will provide them with telework.
Telework, yes, sir.
Okay, so that they don't lose sick days or pay
Yes,
if
sir.
they want to do that telework.
Yes.
Okay.
And that
All right.
telework, Mr. Scripture, just to be clear, if it was a teacher and they're able to work and assist students, they can still do that. But you're correct, the telework option.
But that option's for teachers, assistants, and cafeteria, and
For
Yes,
employees.
everybody.
Yes.
Okay, all
And
right.
I've talked
And
with
that's
under
Mrs.
quarantine.
Kaminsky, updates it every year. And I've been speaking with her this week just because, you know, we've been getting some new staff members. As of today, everybody that is employed is in, just in case something happens.
For the training modules.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So we are doing our best to work with our employees so that they don't lose time, even if they are quarantined or
Good.
exposed to COVID.
So we offer that no matter how many times they get quarantined in a year.
This is the state. So
Okay.
once we offer the telework, as long as they have documentation, it has to be documented.
And that documentation is not, so for point of clarity, with us sending these letters to staff members, those letters are going per the guidance of the health department. So that quantifies as a legal document for them. If they're quarantined by their physician or healthcare provider, that's it. As I gave the example to Mr. Ziggs this morning, if a teacher calls and says, I have a tummy ache, that doesn't
Okay,
equate.
now it's quarantined either by the health department or their doctor, not
Right.
I don't want to come to work.
Yes.
Okay.
So what happens if they're on quarantine and they get COVID? Are the 80 hours and they can't work at all? Like with their, like, do they have to take sick days then? Or are they still in the 80 hours?
If they have been quarantined,
Uh-huh.
they're within the 80 hours. If they're exposed for any reason, if we say, hey, don't come to work,
That's a telework.
yes, we can't punish you and tell you not to come.
No, but say you're a teacher or that you're a staff member who can't do the telework because you're like deaf, you're.
But if
That's
they've
the 80
been
hours.
told by the doctor, then that's covered.
That's the 80 hours.
That's covered, yes, ma'am.
Okay. After 80 hours, they have to take their sick leave.
Yes, and if they don't have sick leave, it comes out of their pay, which is
Okay.
why we do our best to offer telework.
Okay, gotcha.
But it's an option, it's always an option, they don't have to.
Okay.
Because they could be under quarantine and say, well, I'm not working.
Right.
Well, that's their choice.
Yeah, that's
As
their
long
choice.
as we give them the option.
Right.
So do we have protocols in place for these teachers that are currently on quarantine from the health department and the school system to begin doing their classes telework?
When they do it, they get a completion certificate and it's time
No,
stamped.
No, I'm talking about the physical
She's talking
teaching.
about
physical.
Sorry.
Okay.
Do we have a procedure in
So
place?
the high school is already set up, and that's why the call came out. They already do theirs through Canvas. One of the things we'll have to do is get with the middle school and high school, because there's a difference between remote work and virtual instruction.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things that we saw in Jones Street try to stop us, is being able to offer virtual instruction. However, I was in a meeting the other day with several superintendents, and how can I say this without, I'm gonna just say it. You're gonna sue us for trying to meet the needs of students. So if the board decides that we need to do the best we can to face our students, if we have to shift to that, like I said, when we just discussed it, to try to put it off as long as we can, but if we have to shift forward, I'll move as the board sees fit for us to make sure we meet our kids to the best of our ability. But there are forces in Raleigh that do not want us to provide virtual as an option.
But what I'm getting at is for those teachers that are under quarantine for instance, and I'm just throwing this out here, this teacher, this is just a subject, I do not know who, I cannot recall who's teaching, but they're teaching our math class. That math teacher, if they're not out on sick, can still do the virtual, we set it up where they're actually teaching the class and there's just a monitor for the high school or whatever grade it is.
So to give you a point of clarity, Zig can talk about his because he has the lowest numbers, but Ms. Mathias is already working on a plan, hence why we needed extra subs approved
Okay,
to try to get subs and individuals in the building, even if they are monitors, so that those teachers can instruct the kids from wherever they are as they're in their classroom. But I'll let Mr. Ziegler expound upon the high school.
Yes, sir. So for the high school, what we have in place is BOE Meeting. We rolled that out, so that way our quarantine students will be able to still get the information from home. But now that it's kind of shifted, we have teachers at home, same way though, just reversed. So what will happen at the high school for the students that are still on campus in the classroom, they'll have a facilitator in the classroom, the teacher will broadcast from home to the students.
And not to answer, but I know we need to get back to Mr. Alberto and his question. Just for the clarity of the difference, what we're doing now is because of kids having to be quarantined, but just his question was around just an option for kids that did not feel safe, but I don't know how he feels now since we had some additional action.
thank you for addressing that lead question, and, I have another question about
Oh,
that.
okay.
How are we getting that information out to our faculty and staff?
Well, the first thing that I usually do, well, the contagious disease leave has been in the whole time.
Right, but how are we making sure that they understand that that's in play now?
Well, part of this document here, this is why I kind of printed it out. It's a 4-page document, but I kind of condensed it and highlighted these key points for you. I do plan to send this to the staff,
And what-
but I wanted you all to kind of see what will be going out to them first.
And what we can do always is, as staff are coming back on Monday, I'll make an appointment with the principals so that we can get them in with their staff before exiting campus, just to answer any questions they have around me as well.
Yeah, because this is not real clear about the telework thing,
No,
but I
they
think
don't
we
think
need
it
to
is.
make sure that they understand it, that's the option.
Okay, I have one more question to ask, and you kind of touched on it, or I have another question to ask that Mr. Hurley touched on it. Now that we are going to be wearing masks, how does that change, especially at the elementary school with students with moving class to class, eating in the lunchroom? Because we said we were going to open back up those common places. So what is that? Is that going to change any of that, or is that going to?
So that's why we'd like to get with the principals around
Okay.
that, but however, my vision of where we would go is how we were moving through the building, with the control, and that was on my slides, y'all, and I apologize. But the recommendations to you were to require approved cloth masks to be worn in Terrell County school buildings by students, staff, and visitors. Also, looking at if students.
What's an approved cloth mask?
What they said, cloth face covering.
Any cloth,
I think it means a face covering.
any cloth.
So,
We did not clarify that.
Face-
Clarify.
Yeah, that's my
I just
question,
don't-
you know.
I don't know what that is, like-
What's approved mask?
the cloth face coverings,
We had one in place, I don't remember what it said.
well, I will go back and look at it, but the thing is, it said double layer, and I don't have it in front of me. There was something in the guidance around, they didn't want you walking around with your drawers on your face.
Right.
But what we will do is the approved cloth face covering, if it said like double ply, but I'll go back in there, I was gonna say, yeah, double ply, but I'll go back. As the district will know, we reordered for small kids as well, but let me get back. Utilizing controlled traffic measures in the classroom, and I know this doesn't change your motion that you made, but where we had students separated in the hallway as far as lining, the spacing, we will still keep the water fountain shut off. However, families still could use water bottles, sanitation stations will still be there. Air test stations, we weren't looking at moving it back, and then desks will still remain separated to increase social distancing with the kids. But what I would ask is get with the principals, because I know Monday is coming, to kind of figure out how they would move and how we could make that and get that information back to you around the shared space. Outside, I mean, that's outside, we will do our best to keep them, especially at the high school, in the middle school and the elementary school, separated as much as we can, but I really
Don't
don't sit
stop
down and
raining,
talk to
we'll
them.
go outside.
Yeah, if you won't stop raining, you can't.
Well,
You
yeah.
can't go outside now, it won't start raining.
No, the elementary.
They're drowned.
Oh,
Mr. Mr. Gray, if you don't mind too, in the Strong Schools Toolkit, it does not mention anything in regards to the sharing of like manipulatives for example, in elementary math groups, and they're using math manipulatives or, like the sharing of crayons and art and things like that. Nothing is mentioned, and it used to talk about in some of the older toolkits, probably 50 of them ago, where they couldn't share supplies.
Yeah, I think a
So
lot
what
of,
is the guidance there?
remember like towards, back in the beginning, everybody was sanitizing their packages coming in. I think some of that evidence has shown that surface level, contamination is very, very low risk of spread. So I think, passing something like crayons or something like that, or sitting at a desk or something like that, probably would not be a big spread. It's a respiratory face-to-face.
So it should be okay as far as our math manipulatives being shared or art supplies being shared?
Right, the primary cause of all face-to-face contact is face-to-face talking and then, particles, going from person to person. That's the organ mass. So they've taken a lot of that stuff out that they had before about when it was like crayons, pens, desks, tables, with somebody sitting there or something like that. A lot of that language has kind of gone away in more in favor of the organ mass.
Right. Thank you.
So to answer Mr. Scription's question about a mask or cloth, the guidance in the handbook, I couldn't bring it up. It actually takes us to the CDC recommendation, and it does say have 2 or more layers of washable, breathable fabric, and that's per the CDC guidelines.
So who checks that?
Maybe we can, hopefully our parents will follow the protocol.
So I just want to clarify, we are not doing access stations.
No, ma'am.
Okay. And we're not doing, do our students have to check in with the scanners for temperature, or we're not doing that
We
anymore?
do not have the scanners.
Okay.
They're still there for usage.
But
as
we don't-
need,
they're not
but we have
required.
not used them. As I saw the volleyball game the other night, they decided to use that, and that's not a problem as we have visitors and guests coming in. But as of right now, that's not a mandate unless we go back and need to do it.
My other question about procedures is visitors, especially at the elementary school. How are we handling, how that works? Yeah.
So the elementary school asked me the other day about school starting and visitors coming and walking through the building first day of school. I'm sorry, I believe that we're not, unless it's the elementary, pre-K. We have staff in place that gather them there. I know it's the first days, but we need to take every effort we can. So I told the principal of the elementary school that I'm not giving authority for visitors to walk their kids to the class starting the school year.
That we notify parents of this.
I just had that conversation with the principal, so I would defer to her.
Right.
Yes, that was in my open house video that was linked to our website this afternoon at noon.
Okay.
Can you include an all-call or whatever to parents, because everyone does not have internet access, and that's something that, I hope we can get information out to parents other than online, because everybody doesn't have the access. So I think important things like this need to be, I know we all get tired of all the phone calls, but at least you get the information. And so I think maybe we should put that out, because for a lot of parents, that first day, and that would eliminate that.
No problem.
What I will do is, we'll make sure that gets out. If I can get 3 minutes with the team before they leave tonight, we'll outline our plans for the weekend.
It'd be nice to go out as soon, it would be nice if you could go out as soon as possible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
I think those are all the questions I have been texted today. Anybody else got any questions? Is there any other motions we need about following this guidance, or are you good with, okay, are there any other motions we need for COVID protocols? Okay, and everybody's clear on everything? Anybody got any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. No other questions, anything else to add? Good? Okay. Is there a motion for, adjournment? I'm sorry, the rain's really loud, but I think I heard Miss JD make a motion for adjournment. How do you vote, Miss JD?
Yes.
How do you vote, Miss Robin?
Yes.
How How do you vote, Mr. Lee?
Yes.
And I vote yes. This special meeting is adjourned. Thank you.